This is the BioCentury Show. Brought to you by BioCentury Grand Rounds. Join BioCentury and Insights partner McKinsey & Company this September in Nashville for an R&D forum at the interface of industry and academia.
Hello and welcome to the BioCentury Show. I am Simone Fishburn, Editor-in-Chief at BioCentury. It is really a delight to be joined today by Jane Grogan, EVP and Head of Research at Biogen. Jane joined Biogen in 2023 after serving as CSO at Graphite Bio and then Arsenal Bio, both companies in cell and gene therapy. Before that, Jane, you were 15 years at Genentech and you had increasingly senior roles in immuno-oncology and immunology. So all of that we're going to feed into this conversation. So Jane, I'm sure you knew this before you joined Biogen, but Biogen is one of those companies. It is never far from the conversation at the heart of biotech. You know, people watch Biogen, it's an interesting company. And, Chris Viehbacher became CEO in November 22. Within a year, he had split R&D into two divisions, so research and development, and hired you to head up research, right? And so with that, he's followed through on the intent to expand the pipeline beyond neurology, tapping into your background, of course, in immunology or I&I. So let's start there. You are in charge of research. And I want to sort of start at that, maybe your holistic view, the internal changes that you are making to really expand the research base and establish that at Biogen. What are the sort of scientific drivers that you guys are investigating?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Simone, and for inviting me here today, and hope I can share some insights and some of the exciting nuggets that we're following here at Biogen. And so there's a lot to unpack in your question, so maybe I'll just take it from the beginning. It's really an exciting time at Biogen, and I think you're really correct in saying that, Biogen is at the heart of biotech, the biotech industry. It's one of the first biotechs, obviously founded by the greats like Phil Sharp. It was the first to move into Kendall Square in Cambridge, which, as a new transplant to Cambridge myself, is a thrilling and exciting ecosystem. And I'm really grateful to the welcome that I've had here with not only my Biogen colleagues, but also other colleagues in the community as well. And we really, truly are one ecosystem together, really all of us together putting patients and unmet medical need as our North Star. So it is an exciting time at Biogen. We're really focused, and you've heard this by Chris and others on the executive team too, about continuing to build where we have success. We have a very rich pipeline. We're going after hard challenges, and if these hit, these will be game-changing for patients, and we're very excited by our pipeline. And we're trying to build in some more diversity and balance the risk in our portfolio by extending into disease areas beyond neurology that we're really focused in now, and extending our rare disease franchise, and then really building out the immunology footprint as well. And we can talk a little bit about why I think immunology is exciting at the moment. But it's certainly a really exciting time for Biogen in the sense that as we think about diversifying not only the disease areas and areas of biology, it's making sure we have the right modalities to get there as well. And I think you can see in our pipeline, we're not adverse to taking big risks and challenges with new modalities and championing them with partnerships along the way.
So I'm going to come back to the modality question and some of the other ones, but I want to dig a little bit into the kind of internal research. We'll get into in a minute to sort of acquisitions and external innovation, but, what is the, in your labs, the kind of research that you're bringing in that's going on now that wasn't before? I don't expect you to disclose, your new cool targets that you've discovered or something like that, but perhaps you can talk a little bit about some of the, internal investigative research that goes on. I think quite often people don't think that the large companies do that much internally, but you're head of research, so presumably you do.
Yeah, again, there's a lot to unpack there. I think, my job is to build the growth engine for the company. And that's what research needs to be. And the beauty and the dilemma of that is research and discovery really needs to be thinking about what the unmet medical need is 5 years out from now. And how do you predict that, right? And so how do you set up an organization to be prepared for that and to have a portfolio of opportunities to reach and understand and treat that unmet medical need at the time that it comes? So that's the challenge I think all of us face in the industry. What I've been spending my time on the first few months here, I'm only 7 months in at the moment to the position, is really prioritizing the projects that we have at hand. We've done this in a few ways, is really setting clear criteria for what moving a successful molecule through the pipeline is. And we've had a good hard look at what that is. And so it's been really right-sizing the internal research portfolio so that when we move it into clinical development, it has a high probability of success. And so you've heard other companies talk about this in various ways and, 3 pillars or chain of translatability. The way we think about this really is ensuring that you have one, the right target, and we can talk about how one thinks about getting to those, 2, the right modality, and we'll talk about that later. And 3, the biggest thing is how do you move a molecule through and get the most rapid preclinical proof of, the clinical proof of concept when you get into the clinic. And so can you access the patients quickly? Do you have a diagnosis in place, which is particularly important with rare diseases? Can you measure target engagement? So is your drug there engaged with the function that you've imbued it with? And then what's that clinical endpoint? Can you link a biomarker to that clinical endpoint or really have a rapid clinical endpoint in and of itself? And in order to actually get there, the 4th pillar that we really have been focused on here at Biogen in the last few months is keeping that kind of commercial tractability in front of us as well. And so as I've been building out research, we're in close partnership with all aspects of those 4 nodes that are required for success. So what's the clinical unmet medical need, and working with our clinical and development colleagues, making sure that the drug is as best as it can be from a pharmacological perspective, working with the biomarker and translation groups to ensure that we can measure various parameters, and really together with our corporate strategies, defining what that North Star is for Biogen at the moment. And so there's been a lot of focus on that and some reorganization within research to get there. We're really broken things out into key areas of biology that we're championing and hiring into at the moment. So we've got active recruitment going on into the research organization to, refresh and rebuild our pipeline. We've organised around what we call centres of excellence. So this is really the modalities group, the non-clinical sciences group, and our translational biomarkers group. And then obviously we have our research operations as well. And then part of the interesting thing about pulling research away from development, so to speak, is that we remained completely united in our goals. We've got a research kind of review committee that we use now to championing our pipeline, while we remain really close with our development and manufacturing colleagues too.
So we can, keep going along that line. We'll come back to that line in a minute, but I do want to feed in now your recent acquisition of HiBio, which you haven't yet spoken about much, because maybe you can map that on to some of the things you just talked about. So for background for everybody, that deal gave you, am I saying it right, felzartamab? It's an anti-CD38 mAb. And, you've talked about that a little bit as a pipeline and a product for immune-mediated diseases. Now, the first 3 are kidney-related. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the science that went into that, why that was a good deal for you, and whether you see that agent actually going into non-kidney diseases, like even beyond that when you talk about a pipeline and product.
Yeah, we're super excited by the HiBio acquisition for multiple reasons. The asset and the pipeline that affords us, the team. Again, a lot of us are going after fairly similar molecules and targets, and really to execute on that requires the right team. And HiBio really was and is that right team. And third, it really matches where we want to head in Biogen. So I'll start with the latter first. We specialize in rare disease at Biogen. We're very in a sweet spot of being able to identify patients, come up with really, novel modalities, find and track those patients in clinical trial, and really importantly, launch in those areas as well. So the ecosystem that we have all the way from discovery through to commercialization globally is a very unique position that we're in as an organization. And so one way we've been thinking about immunology build is to capitalize on that mindset and really start with the idea of rare diseases, moving into then perhaps more common or broad diseases. And with that mindset, and as we were looking at the external landscape to bolster our own pipeline, we engaged in discussions in HiBio, and they really fit that mold because they've taken a very known molecule and applied it to a rare disease mindset. So they've gone after 3 kidney indications, antibody-mediated rejection, IgAN, and PMN as well, and successfully executed on 3 independent phase 2 clinical trials. And so we're very excited about moving into phase 3 clinical trials for these. And what that really does is gives us a number of opportunities. So felzar, as you said, is a differentiated anti-CD38 antibody. And not only does it look like it could be very, very game-changing in some of these nephrology indications, which would allow us to both extend into further nephrology indications and other transplantation indications, but also out into more common pathways that in which B cells are aberrant. And I should back up and say, this is a depleting antibody.
Yeah, maybe just explain how it works.
Yeah.
It obviously depletes
just for the audience, this is a B cell depleting antibody that really targets a few different cell types, but particularly the plasma cells, which are the cells that are the long-lived cells that maintain the antibody memory, and particularly in the case of the diseases we're going after, the aberrant autoantibody population as well. And so we know there's a real sweet spot here with felzar to be able to hopefully achieve efficacy in phase 3. So we're very excited by that. And I think there's a build there too. There's a lot of renewed interest in targeting B cells in immunology. And I think not only is this tried and true with molecules like, the anti-CD28 depleting antibodies that target different populations of B cells, but also with the B cell therapies that have really hit center stage in the really fantastic efficacy they've had in lupus nephritis. And I think that's really brought a lot of excitement back to the field of targeting B cells to remove those autoreactive cells. And I think there's going to be more than one way to get there. There might be a right way or a wrong way in different disease indications. And I think the best thing is it provides more optionality now for patients and for their providers as well.
So you've jumped all the way. I had that question lined up for you, but let's do it now, because you have, and your background is obviously oncology and immunology. And now what we're actually seeing is this reverse direction of things from oncology being deployed with CAR Ts, as you pointed out, in B cell, autoimmune diseases. So I'm sort of interested in how, outside of Biogen, how big an opportunity you think that can be, or is it sort of going to be just a niche, way of handling this? And then let's start down that road of modalities and ask whether that is an area that Biogen is willing to get into. Yeah,
look, targeting B cells remains front and center to really getting aberrant autoimmune diseases and pathways under control. We know that the field knows this. There's been a lot of work done on this, threading that needle in the right modality. Should this be a single depleting antibody? We believe yes. And there's others in front of us. But there's also a possibility for building into this, bispecifics, bringing in T-cell engagers. And I think the one really important mindset to think about this is all of these approaches, including cell therapy, is one approach to deplete, ablate that population of cells. And so I think the opportunity remains vast. Autoimmune responses and aberrant autoantibody responses are drivers of a lot of disease. And so the opportunity is massive for patients, and in terms of, I think, of return on investment as well. I think the key will be, what's the right approach for the right disease? I'm a big believer in cell therapies, as you know, we can get to
Right,
Biogen.
your own background, right? Yeah.
But I think also, you know, in some of these autoimmune diseases, they can be completely debilitating when you think about, you know, really aggressive lupus nephritis. And treating, you know, non-ambulatory patients with a cell therapy seems really reasonable. But there's also patients we want to treat that are ambulatory, that are walking around every day, that are currently on treatments that they're going to have to take, or medicines they're going to have to take chronically. And the hope is that maybe these kind of treatments could be now game-changing. If you could give that in a pill or an injectable, that's just going to make people's quality of life that much better.
Okay, we are at time for a break, so we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to just dig a little bit more into these questions around Biogen's and some of the sort of regular research questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
This September in Nashville, BioCentury launches Grand Rounds, a new interdisciplinary R&D forum at the interface of industry and academia. Join BioCentury and a rich roster of innovators and key thought leaders to identify leading-edge discoveries and discuss urgent challenges that must be solved to translate these innovations into product development and medical practice. Meet academic innovators, physician scientists, early-stage investors, and biopharma R&D leaders for 2 days of networking, partnering, and debate. Register at biocenturygrandrounds.com.
We are back on the BioCentury show with guest Jane Grogan from Biogen. And, you know, I want to pick up where we left off and talk about the evolution of research at Biogen and growing the modality toolbox. Obviously, Biogen, well known for prowess in monoclonal antibodies and manufacturing them. You have small molecules, antisense. You mentioned bispecifics. I think you mentioned ADCs. Didn't hear yet about radioligand therapies, but I guess that's more of an oncology play. You know, we've talked a little bit about cell therapies. You've had some failures, of Biogen has, and false starts in gene therapy. And so I'm sort of trying to understand the scope of things that you would undertake, anticipate is returning to gene therapy on the cards. How broad a toolbox do you think you're going to build?
Yeah, I think the key issue is what's the unmet medical need and what's the right modality to get there. And in certain circumstances, we would build these internally and or partner with the appropriate external group that may have those assets, much like we've done with Ionis and the antisense oligo space. So our current pipeline really leverages both small molecules, ASOs, as well as biologics, and we expect to continue expanding in these areas and really drilling down on those modalities. But we're also looking at new platforms. And so we are looking at gene therapy. We have an ongoing effort in that space. I think key to that is tissue-targeted delivery. And with that in mind, and along with some of the other therapeutic approaches that we're taking, we are really mindfully building out a tissue delivery platform that involves being able to link and target initially drugs, whether it be a protein therapeutic, an oligotherapeutic, or a small molecule, to the brain specifically and muscle tissue. And we're building out that platform internally, and we're very excited about some of the portfolio that's coming through in that space. But we're also looking to expand into undruggable, known targets that have been undruggable. I mean, I think protein degradation remains an exciting growing field that we're certainly taking advantage of when we think about intracellular targeting with protein degraders, and also thinking about how you might want to start degrading these aberrant proteins. And this is beyond just, say, amyloid clearance from Alzheimer's brains, but really thinking how we might be able to selectively target autoantibodies or other aberrant proteins as well. So I think that's an emerging field we're very much interested in. And we're going to stay on top of all technologies to mature and grow.
And so how do you think about that in terms of the infrastructure or skill sets that you need to add? Obviously, you've worked with cell therapies, you've worked with gene therapies. These are very different skill sets, and certainly from a manufacturing point of view. I think, to some degree, protein degraders are small molecules, which obviously Biogen has experience in. But, at the same time, you have been culling programs. There is a need to generate revenues. So is there a tension in that need to build those skill sets? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it's a case of, again, staying focused on what we need to achieve for patients and then collaborating. I break that down into two parts. We have teams in place that are really great at working with external partners to bring lead candidates forward and have them assessed in non-clinical safety studies, GLP tox studies, to really understand PK, pharmacology, biodistribution, which has been particularly important with modalities like, ASOs in the brain, and have a great track record in that. As we look to build, we are looking to both maintain a flexible work environment internally and spend our research dollars, time, and mindset with external partners as well. And so what does that mean? It is meaning really bringing an investment mindset to a research organization that often you don't see in large pharma, but you see it all the time in a startup environment. So what are the key projects we're standing around? How are we investing in those? Where's the spend? How much is the internal spend? How much is the external spend? Who do we partner with? Even if we enable that partner to grow with us at the same time, rather than just absorb them or an asset. So we're really looking at all opportunities. Right now, I'll give you an example of one way we're approaching this. We are not initiating cell therapies at the moment internally within Biogen. We don't have the manufacturing set up. We don't have, we're watching and waiting on how this field will unfold. And one way that we're approaching that is just to, invest in some of the cell therapy companies that are out there so that we're in the discussion, we're staying on top of the data, and if and when the time is right, we may be able to make a move in that direction as well. And we're taking this kind of investment mindset to a number of different modalities as well.
Jane, another topic I want to raise is precision medicine and patient stratification. I understand in rare diseases that might be less of a play, but to what degree are you building this into your programs, and how early on do you start thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly for gene therapy, it's obvious that that's the place and way to go forward. And as I mentioned earlier, we've really been able to map out a very nice pathway in the company out to patients. For rare diseases, we start working on natural history studies, so trying to understand from large data banks where the patients are, what's driving the disease, what's driving the history of disease, and if these genetic perturbations are actually the causal drivers of the disease as well. And so we, together with collaborators in the field, do a lot of work on that for things, with organizations and data sets like FinGen and UK Biobank, et cetera. And then being able to actually go back and track and find those patients is really, really critically important. Things get a little bit more complicated when you think about complex diseases. I think, with the wonderful technology that we all have at our fingertips today, using multi-omics to actually deconvolve human data into common pathways, common cell types that underpin these chronic inflammatory diseases, we're getting a better understanding of what's driving subsets of diseases and then thinking about going back and being able to treat those patients. And I think there's a third part, which I talked about a little earlier, which is around tissue-specific delivery. And we also think about precise medicines in the sense of being able to precisely deliver them to where they need to go. So you get a delta in your pharmacology, you get on-target activity while you're really dialing down any off-target effects in non-inflamed tissue as well. And I think getting all this right will be providing great optionality for patients as well.
Well, you actually, tapped into this causal biology concept, which is just a rising one. We hear more and more about it. And I wondered really, we think about, hear a lot about human first, people wanting to anchor their programs in, human data. So I suppose my question is to really broader than even just Biogen. To what degree do you think that this sort of adherence and or North Star of causal biology actually changes the programs and the decisions? Is it something that is a guiding principle, or is it sort of a concept that's frankly been out there for a long time and it's just sort of got a new label now? How do you think about that?
I think we're still at early stages, to be honest, of understanding truly what causal biology is in complex diseases. If you take a step back and you just think about where oncology was before immuno-oncology hit the field, right? There was this great intersection of learning that around tumors were T cells and myeloid cells and other cells as well that were doing something that could be targeted. And by turning the lens on human tissue and samples, biology was revealed in a way that hadn't been in animal models. And that could be sometimes replicated in animal models to understand a specific mechanism or pathway. But those insights really came from human disease, and it's been very successful. And there's still a long way to go, and there's still a lot of target space and causal biology to prosecute for better medicines in oncology. And it's this similar lens that we're turning to other chronic diseases, if you think about oncology as a chronic disease. Certainly in, brain disorders, things like Alzheimer's disease as well. It's a little harder to get tissue there, obviously. And so we try and mimic or interpret what's going on in the brain by measuring things in the cerebral spinal fluid, for example, and make a lot of inferences. And there's a real challenge there. And I think this will be it's the right time to tackle that with the possibilities of machine learning and iteration and AI as well to get there. And also we're starting to get patient, patient data that we can then prosecute. Who's responder, non-responder? How early in the disease do you need to go? And I think these kind of questions are going to be critical to coming up with the next medicines. And I just want to then kind of hark back to the immune system. The immune system is a really exquisitely designed organ in the body, right, to keep us alive and keep us protected from pathogenic infections, viral infections, and works well. And it's designed to respond, expand, fight that thing, and then contract again. Otherwise, we'd just be walking around as one big giant lymph node, right? So it's a very regulated system. And there's 3 ways that this thing can go wrong, or this exquisite system can go wrong, right? You've got a genetic mutation that's driving a dysregulated immune response. You could think FOXP3 deletions are driving lack of being able to suppress. You can also think about dysregulation when you have a chronic activation. And so the immune system is always trying to turn itself off. And if it can't clear away something and remove this debris, a chronic viral infection or a amyloid plaque or a tau plaque, then it's going to be constantly on to try and get rid of that thing. And then the immune system will go through this reset. So when in that cycle, can we target and switch that immune response? And I think this is a challenge in the field when we think about things like neuroinflammation. You need neuroinflammation to get rid of some of the debris in the brain, but you don't want it to be driving chronic disease as well. And so the understanding when in the disease course to intervene is really important. And then the third bucket is when the immune system itself becomes the disease. And so that just harks back to when B cells and T cells start driving autoreactive responses, and they're the cell types that you want to actually remove or switch.
So, I think we have time for sort of one more question, and I want to sort of take it, as I said again, beyond Biogen and to this question of I&I, immunity and immunology and inflammation, And, there's just been this huge groundswell in this space. We have counted at least 5 acquisitions this year over $1 billion, not even talking about partnering deals, investments. Yeah. It's incredibly hot. And my question really is, what's going on? Is there new biology that's really driving this? Are we discovering new targets? Is it the fact that we don't really have that many more targets, but we've got more ways of addressing them with new modalities? Can you just cast your experience and light on why now, why I&I is really taking off so much now?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. And I think it's also because there's a realization that immunology is underpinning almost every single disease in some way, shape, or form. Just, back to what I was just saying, when you have an aberrant perturbation in the body, the immune system swoops in to try and do something about that. And if it doesn't turn off, the immune system itself can become the problem. And we also know, and we're learning, that by dampening down the immune system, a lot of other effects are coming into play as well. Or dampening down the immune system just a little bit is enough to really make a difference. And you can think about, certainly in our portfolio, our NRF2 agonist is working exquisitely well in Friedreich's ataxia, a neuromuscular disease. It's not reversing the course of the disease yet, but it's certainly making changes in patients' lives and making them a little bit more ambulatory. And so when you think about that, you have to start thinking that if we could tackle the immune system early on, there must be more therapeutic pathways in front of us to drive unmet medical need and meet that unmet medical need versus just these cytokine therapies, et cetera, that are out there right now. And then also, we have these new modalities in our toolbox, back to your second comment there. We can think about applying bispecific, multi-specific even targets to target more than one node or more than one pathway or more than one cell type. We can bring the right medicines to the right tissue in terms of tissue-specific targeting. And, we can even think about, or the field can think about, engineering cells, not just to deplete a B cell, but to target that engineered cell into a tissue so that it could be an engine of polypharmacology itself, driving some immunosuppression, driving repair in a tissue as well.
Well, this is fascinating. I could talk a lot longer, but we're out of time, I'm afraid. But we will get another chance to do this actually at BioCentury's Grand Rounds. So thank you very much for joining us today on the BioCentury Show. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I want to thank you so much, Simone, for inviting me today, and I look forward to further discussions with you.
Great. Thank you.
Brought to you by BioCentury Grand Rounds. Join BioCentury and Insights partner McKinsey & Company this September in Nashville for an R&D forum at the interface of industry and academia.